Welcome to Awake Us Now. Our program today is sponsored by Awake Us Now. This series is Kings and Prophets from Solomon to Jeremiah. And now, here's Pastor Chris
Good
Dodge.
morning. Welcome to Kings and Prophets, week number 10. We have an especially exciting but also complex thing to look at today. So before we go any further, we need to pray. Lord, I will make this prayer very personal. I pray that your Holy Spirit would guide me to say things in such a way that they are clear, make sense to all who hear, and cause each and every one of us to be in awe of the way you move in spite of the foolishness and the evil of human actors. Amen. Well, this is a complex subject today, and just to give you a heads up, what we are going to do is we're going to cover 25 chapters of the Bible. The events that take place in a very narrow window of time are incredibly complex, and they're recorded in 1 Kings chapters 15 to 22, 2 Kings chapters 1 to 11, and 2 Chronicles chapters 17 to 22. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cover this morning 25 chapters and 33 years. And we're going to see things that can be easily missed. Let's pick up where we had left off last week. We had been talking about the ministry of Elijah and had stressed that much of the prominent actions of Elijah had taken place during the kingships of Ahab in Israel, King Ahab, and King Jehoshaphat in Judah. And as we looked at Elijah's ministry, we see a man who is called and anointed by God to bring people back to God, and specifically individuals in the northern kingdom of Israel. Elijah's ministry was an amazing one, and Elijah especially ministered to King Ahab. Ahab was not a willing participant, I might add, but Elijah ministered to him. And it's there that we pick up now with some good news and some bad news. The good news is that during this period of King Ahab and King Jehoshaphat and their descendants, there was an alliance between Israel and Judah, and they stopped fighting one another. Now, that's a good thing. When God's people fight one another, it's destructive. It not only destroys individuals, but it also destroys God's reputation among the nations. And so there's good news here, but there's also bad news. And the bad news comes because of the way the alliance was made. This is what we read in 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verse 1. We're told, now Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, had great wealth and honor, and he allied himself with Ahab, king of Israel, by marriage. Now, what's interesting, you really have to dig to figure out what marriage this is referring to. We don't know who Jehoshaphat's wife was. She is apparently not a descendant of King Ahab. What we do know is this, however, when you dig through the 25 chapters and look at verses that are often separated by not just chapters, but even books, here's what we learn. We learn that Ahab and Jezebel, Ahab the worst king Israel ever had, Jezebel, who made it that much worse, idolaters, both of them, who set up Baal worship in Israel, they had a daughter named Athaliah. King Jehoshaphat in Judah had a son who was the crown prince, the eldest of all of his brothers. His name was Jehoram. And taking a look at the details that we find in 1st and 2nd Kings and in 2nd Chronicles, what we learn is that Jehoram married Athaliah. And so the alliance between Israel and Judah was established by this marriage. Unfortunately, it was not a godly marriage. We'll just be real frank. And what we learn is, as things continued to develop, this would descend into tragedy. Now, we're going to take a look at the last days of King Ahab's life. And we're going to examine something that is recorded both in 1 Kings chapter 22 and in 2 Chronicles chapter 18. The books of Kings and Chronicles often contain different information than are found in one or the other. But in this case, they both talk about the same story and give us many of the same details. And the story revolves around the following. Up in Samaria, the capital of Israel, King Ahab invites his now family member, because Jehoshaphat has just given his son to Ahab's daughter. He invites him to come up to Samaria and let's have a conference together. And they go up there to Samaria and they have a conference, and here's what they decide. As they meet in Samaria, Ahab calls out 400 of his prophets. They're false prophets. Now, keep in mind, apparently the prophets of Baal have been killed, but there are more of them. And anyway, these 400 false prophets come and they say, we have a proposal because King Ahab has suggested that we take back some territory that we have lost, that God gave us. And they say, here's what the Lord tells us. Attack and be victorious. And Jehoshaphat receives that, but he asks for a second opinion. Keep in mind, Jehoshaphat is described as a godly man and a godly leader. And he sees through the fog and he says to Ahab, don't you have a prophet of the living God that we can consult? And Ahab says, well, I do. His name is Micaiah, son of Imlah. But I don't like him because he never tells me anything I want to hear. And with that, Jehoshaphat says, well, let's bring him out. And they bring him out, and they ask him, what has the Lord revealed? And he apparently speaks facetiously. He says, attack and be victorious. And the response is, no, tell us the real story. And he says, I saw all Israel scattered on the hillsides because the shepherd was gone. And what happens then? He is thrown in jail. And Judah and Israel attack against the forces of what we would call Syria, ancient Aram, who have occupied Ramoth Gilead. It is a very important city on a major trade route with a massive fortress, but it is also what was known as a city of refuge. In the Torah, God had told the Israelites, establish 6 cities in all of Israel, where people who have killed someone by accident can go and be protected from improper justice. And so they attack Ramoth Gilead, Ahab and Jehoshaphat together, because they're allies now. But Ahab has a suggestion. He says, tell you what, Jehoshaphat, you go into battle in your royal robes, but I'm going to go in disguise. And the Syrians see Jehoshaphat and they think, there's the king of Israel, let's kill him. But Jehoshaphat escapes them and they realize, that's not the king of Israel. But by accident, they fire an arrow that just happens to penetrate the armor of King Ahab, who is basically wearing a Halloween costume, and he dies. And with that, what we learn is King Ahab is gone. And now one of his sons takes over. And this is what we read follows that. Just a few years later, probably about 5 years, Jehoshaphat also dies. His son has been co-reigning with him. And we read this, 2 Chronicles 21, verse 1. Then Jehoshaphat rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David. And Jehoram, his son, succeeded him as king. And so now, the son of Jehoshaphat, who is married to the daughter of Ahab, takes the throne in Judah. And things really get ugly. 2 Chronicles 21, verses 4 and 5 tell us this. When Jehoram established himself firmly over his father's kingdom, He put all his brothers to the sword, along with some of the officials of Israel. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. And so now what we have is this 32-year-old man who will only live to be 40, has killed all of his brothers so that no one can threaten his throne. And he's married to the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, and he has absolutely no heart for God. And now, here's where things get complicated. So I pray that you're tracking here so far, but this is where things really get complicated because the names change and they're all the same, okay? This is what we learn. In this narrow window of history, from the time of Ahab and Jehoshaphat to their descendants, 33 years, we have a narrow window of time where confusion reigns for anyone who studies the Scriptures. And it is so easy to miss some of these things. But when you take a look at the entire 25 chapters and put all of the little pieces that are scattered throughout, here's what you learn. In Israel, the first descendant of Ahab and Jezebel to take the throne is a guy by the name of Ahaziah. He reigns for only 2 years. And then he dies. And then he is succeeded by his younger brother, apparently, Joram. By the way, Joram is a nickname. In the Hebrew Bible, his name is Jehoram. The same name as the individual who is the descendant of Jehoshaphat and Athaliah, who rules down in Judah. Is this getting complex? It gets even better. So hang in there. So you've got Ahaziah rules for 2 years, and then Joram, or Jehoram as the Hebrew Scriptures would say, takes the throne after Ahaziah's death. Jehoram, on the other hand, as we've already seen, who had co-reigned with his father for a number of years, but reigns supreme and alone for 8 years. Jehoram is succeeded by his son, Ahaziah. Now, these people are all interrelated. Please note they're even choosing the same names for their offspring. And that's one of the reasons this gets so complex. But it gets even more interesting as this develops. And if you're saying to yourself, well, this is convoluted and, I don't really need to know this, hang in there, please. Because I believe what we're going to see, let me rephrase that. What we're going to see is that God can take even the most despicable actions of human beings who have no desire to follow him and turn it around to accomplish his purposes in the end. In spite of human machinations, God ultimately is victorious. So, let's move to the next step. Ahab and Jezebel have their daughter Athaliah, who marries Jehoram, and then Ahaziah rules for 2 years, and then Joram or Jehoram as he's also called, comes next. And it's in this period of time that the prophet Elijah steps in once again. And for the first time we have recorded, he actually deals not with the northern kingdom of Israel, but with the southern kingdom of Judah. And he writes a letter to King Jehoram of Judah, the son of Jehoshaphat, the guy who is married to Athaliah, Ahab's daughter, okay? This is the only example we have in the Bible of something written by Elijah. And it's recorded in the book of 2 Chronicles. It is a tough letter, let me tell you. This is what we read, 2 Chronicles 21, verses 12 and 13. Elijah writes and he says, "This is what the Lord, the God of your father David, says. You have not followed the ways of your father Jehoshaphat, or of Asa, who is your grandfather, king of Judah. But you followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and you have led Judah and the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves just as the house of Ahab did." Elijah writes to a descendant of King David and says, you are following the Baals. You are following the disgusting worship and practices of the people of the north. You have turned away from what your dad said and what your grandfather said. You've turned away from the ways of David, who founded this dynasty. And then he goes on. He says, verses 13 and following, you have also murdered your own brothers, members of your own family, men who were better than you. So now the Lord is about to strike your people, your sons, your wives, and everything that is yours with a heavy blow. You yourself will be very ill with a lingering disease of the bowels until the disease causes your bowels to come out. Now, that is a tough letter, but it's also a merciful one. Before these events take place, God gives Elijah a glimpse of the future. And Elijah tells the king of Judah, the path you are on is destructive. You need to turn back from this. You shouldn't go in the direction you're going, but because you've decided to go this way, here's going to be the outcome. And even here, as was the case in the northern kingdom of Israel, God's desire is to call people back to himself. It's a tough word. There's no denying that. But it's a word of mercy saying, don't go this way. Stop what you are doing. Don't turn away from the Lord your God. Well, what we learn is Jehoram continued to do what he had always done, and he ends up dying. And so now, the son of Athaliah and Jehoram, the king of Judah, becomes the king of Judah. But in the north, his uncle is reigning. And his uncle, Joram, is the king up north. And so what has happened? The spiritual pollution of the northern kingdom has not only come down to the south in Judah, but it has taken the throne. And it's at this point that things really get bad. If you think this is tragic, I'll just say we haven't seen anything yet. Because this is what we learn. Years earlier, before Ahab died, Judah and Israel decided that they would try to take back Ramoth Gilead. It didn't work. And now, during the reign of Ahaziah in Judah and Joram in Israel, the two of them decide, let's see if we can't regain Ramoth Gilead. And here's what happens. They attack Ramoth Gilead, and Joram, the king of Israel, is severely wounded. And so he goes to recover. He leaves the battlefield, and the battle continues to rage, I might add. He leaves the battlefield and he goes to Jezreel, where the summer palace is located. And his desire is to heal there and to recover. His nephew, king of Judah, Ahaziah, who has the same name as Joram's older brother, who is already dead, Ahaziah goes to Jezreel to check on his uncle and to encourage him. And while they're there together, something that had been predicted years earlier, when Elijah had confronted the priests of Baal up north at Mount Carmel and then had to flee down to Mount Sinai. At Sinai, God had told Elijah, I give you 3 tasks. You are to anoint a successor, Elisha. You are to anoint Hazael, king of Aram. He's the guy who's fighting at Ramoth Gilead and has wounded Joram of Israel. And you are also to anoint Jehu, king of Israel. And so what happens? 2 Kings chapter 9, verses 1 to 3. The prophet Elijah, working at the behest of Elijah, the prophet Elijah summoned a man from the company of prophets and said to him, "Tuck your cloak into your belt, take this flask of olive oil with you, and go to Ramoth Gilead. When you get there, look for Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi." By the way, this Jehoshaphat, Jehu's father, is not the same Jehoshaphat as the king of Judah who is now dead. But anyway, anoint him, go to him, get him away from his companions, take him to the inner room, then take the flask and pour the oil on his head and declare, "This is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel." And what happens? Well, Jehu heads to Jezreel, where Joram and Ahaziah are sitting together talking, uncle with his nephew. Uncle recovering, nephew sympathetic. And all of a sudden, they see this mad chariot driver coming toward them. Some people say he drives like Jehu, son of Nimshi. By the way, Nimshi is his grandfather. The name in Hebrew actually means weasel. I don't know why that was chosen, but that's his name. Anyway, they see Jehu driving, and they send word out, "Are you coming in peace?" And Jehu's response is, "What does what has gone on in Israel have to do with peace?" And he gets there and he confronts the king of Israel, Joram, the king of Judah, Ahaziah. And we read, when Joram saw Jehu, he asked, "Have you come in peace, Jehu?" And he says, "How can there be peace as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound?" Joram turned about and fled, calling out to Ahaziah, "Treachery, Ahaziah!" And the result? Jehu pulls out his bow and arrow. He fires from a distance and hits Joram in the back and kills him. And then he chases after Ahaziah and wounds him, and Ahaziah dies. And all of a sudden, the king of Israel is gone, and the king of Judah is gone. And if you think, wow, that's upsetting, it's only begun to get upset. Because this is what we read. When Athaliah, remember her? We met her at the very beginning. Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, who had been married to the king of Judah, Jehoram. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. And then what we have is Jehoram is gone, Joram is gone, Ahaziah is gone, and Athaliah, the queen mother of Judah, is in control. And she begins to kill off her own grandsons. She kills all of the descendants of her son Ahaziah the king. And her desire is to completely eliminate the royal line of David through which Messiah will come. Do you realize, in a 33-year period, we have the nation going to the point where all of a sudden, a woman who is the daughter of two of the most corrupt rulers ever, married to another corrupt ruler, the son of another corrupt ruler, and the brother of another corrupt ruler, is now going to kill all of those who can be the ancestors of Messiah. I find it interesting that happened in 33 years. Does that number mean anything at all? Well, we read chapter 11, verse 2. But Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Jehoram, and the sister of Ahaziah. So this is a woman who grew up in this ungodly home, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him from Athaliah, so he was not killed. And as a result, a godly king will ultimately come to the throne against the wishes of his grandmother, who has destroyed and tried to destroy the line of the Messiah. And that's where we need to end.
Thanks for joining us today. Come back and join us again next time. Our program is sponsored by Awake Us Now.